What if I told you the next World Cup is already raising eyebrows long before the first whistle blows? The 2034 World Cup in Saudi Arabia has sparked a global debate, and some of the controversies might surprise you. Is it a groundbreaking step for the Middle East or a game played for all the wrong reasons? Stick around because this story goes deeper than you think. The World Cup is more than just a tournament. It's a global phenomenon. It unites nations, creates unforgettable memories, and showcases the best of what humanity has to offer. But behind the glitz and glamour of the 2034 event lies a story riddled with questions. Why Saudi Arabia? How did they secure the hosting rights? And most importantly, what does this mean for the world of football and beyond? Let's start with how Saudi Arabia won the bid for 2034. Critics are already calling it a done deal. After Australia pulled out of the race, Saudi Arabia stood as the lone bidder, a move that left many questioning whether FIFA's decision was truly democratic. This wasn't just a coincidence. Saudi Arabia's campaign was meticulously planned, backed by its immense wealth and political influence. But here's the kicker. Some say this is less about football and more about a global image makeover. Now, let's talk about the environment. Hosting a World Cup in Saudi Arabia isn't just a financial and logistical challenge, it's an environmental one. The country's scorching temperatures and desert climate will demand extensive energy use to cool stadiums, training grounds, and accommodations. Qatar's 2022 World Cup pioneered the use of air-conditioned outdoor stadiums, but it came at a significant environmental cost. Saudi Arabia is likely to follow a similar path, or even upscale it, considering the country's ambitious infrastructure goals. Critics argue that FIFA's promises of sustainability clash with the reality of hosting in such conditions. Transporting millions of fans, building new facilities, and managing energy-intensive operations will leave a hefty carbon footprint. Saudi Arabia claims its Vision 2030 will incorporate green technologies, but many are skeptical. Is this commitment genuine, or just another example of greenwashing to distract from the event's environmental toll? The way Saudi Arabia won the hosting rights left many with a bitter taste. FIFA announced an expedited bid process for the 2034 World Cup, giving countries just weeks to declare their interest. Australia initially showed interest, but quickly backed out, leaving Saudi Arabia as the sole contender. Coincidence? Critics think otherwise. They point to Saudi Arabia's strategic partnerships and financial clout. FIFA's president, Gianni Infantino, has been seen cozying up to Saudi leaders at key events, fueling suspicions of favoritism. Some experts argue that Saudi Arabia leveraged its influence within FIFA to ensure a clear path to victory. Others say this is just modern football, where the game off the pitch is as crucial as the one on it. Then, there's the elephant in the room, sports washing. This term refers to using major sporting events to clean up a tarnished reputation. For Saudi Arabia, hosting the World Cup is the crown jewel in a series of high-profile investments in global sports. From buying stakes in Newcastle United to launching Live Golf, the kingdom has made it clear. It wants to be seen as a global sports hub. But here's the thing. Sports washing isn't just about image. It's also about distracting the world from issues like ongoing conflicts, crackdowns on dissent, and the controversial treatment of migrant workers. Critics argue that by hosting the World Cup, Saudi Arabia aims to shift attention away from these issues and present itself as a progressive, modern state. Now, let's talk about the human cost. The Gulf region's history with major sporting events is a cautionary tale. In Qatar, the 2022 World Cup drew sharp criticism for the treatment of migrant workers. Reports of unpaid wages, unsafe working conditions, and even deaths surfaced during the construction of stadiums. Will Saudi Arabia follow a similar path? Advocates fear that the same issues could repeat or even worsen under Saudi Arabia's watch. After all, the kingdom relies heavily on migrant labor, and workers often face exploitation, limited rights, and harsh working environments. Human rights organizations are already pushing for FIFA to ensure better protections, but can they enforce real change? Another issue is cultural compatibility. Saudi Arabia has strict laws that clash with the values of many fans and players. For instance, LGBTQ+ rights are non-existent in the kingdom, where same-sex relationships are criminalized. This raises the question, will Saudi Arabia make concessions to accommodate a diverse global audience, or will fans feel unwelcome? The backlash has already begun. Activists are calling for boycotts, while some players and teams have hinted at protests. The 2034 World Cup could become a battleground for larger debates about equality, inclusivity, and the role of sport in addressing or ignoring social issues. On the surface, hosting the World Cup seems like an economic windfall. For Saudi Arabia, it's part of Vision 2030, a plan to diversify the economy and reduce its reliance on oil. But here's the catch. Hosting the World Cup is incredibly expensive. Qatar spent over $220 billion on infrastructure and preparations. If Saudi Arabia follows suit, can it recoup those costs? Critics argue that the tournament could become a financial burden rather than a benefit, especially if controversies deter sponsors or fans. The 2034 World Cup represents a tipping point, not just for Saudi Arabia, but for football itself. Will the tournament pave the way for a more inclusive, transparent FIFA? Or will it confirm what many fans fear, that football has become a game of money and politics, far removed from its roots? The decisions made in the next decade will shape not just this event, but the future of the sport. The World Cup in Saudi Arabia is shaping up to be one of the most controversial events in modern football history. From the questionable bid process to concerns about human rights and inclusivity, this isn't just a sports story, it's a global reckoning. The world will be watching, not just for the goals and glory, but for what this tournament represents. Make sure to subscribe to Wander Watch for more untold stories and fresh perspectives on the wonders and workings of our world.